If revolution was a movie, I'd be theme music. Time to ignite what I spit is lighter fluid. Stepping into it, fixed rays, such a glorious design. Marching into the biggest fight of our lives. Time to spoil the
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the BLKFLA experience. We are the cultural archive for the Black political movement in the state of Florida, where our purpose is to help you reimagine a Florida where Black people are able to live in freedom, equity, and authenticity. I'm your host, Jamal Still, and we are taking this time to dive into all things Black politics and Black culture. So, let's get into it. I have the pleasure of having on, honestly, the main influence behind said podcast. Listen, no cap, no lies. This is all facts. These are three of the most dynamic women that you will ever meet in your life when it comes to Black political organizing, and how to run incredible campaigns in the state of Florida. And one day they decided to allow us some sort of entrance into their group chat that they have with themselves and other people, to give us this awesome Twitter space / podcast that is known as Florida Black Girls. I don't know how, I'll be honest with you, I don't know how I got put onto it. I was just on Twitter one day and all of a sudden I just saw Jasmine sharing all of this stuff about Florida Black Girls. And I was like, let's see what happens. And it happened. And so I then had the pleasure of meeting all of them in person in 2022 when Leadership Blue was in Tampa, Florida, and the Dems thought it would be a really smart thing to have a live episode of Florida Black Girls during Leadership Blue. It was very smart. It was very intelligent on their part. One of the few intelligent things they do in life. But I digress. It's my show. I'm just gonna say, gonna say what I say. Ladies and gentlemen, family, friends, kinfolk, MB gang, and all of the things, I would like to introduce to you all and present to others Jasmine Rogers, Lindsay Pollard, and Maya Brown, the affectionately known Florida Black Girls are here on BLKFLA. Finally, how y'all doing? What's going on?
Oh my God, that was such a warm welcome. Thank you.
We try. We do our best for the kids.
I love everything about that. Like that intro, we need it. I'm glad this is recorded because we're going to take that and chop it up and use it for our socials. But that is how I too got engaged in Florida Black Girls Live, with Jasmine sharing random stuff on the internet and sending it to our group chat. And we were just like, okay, people want to know what we're talking about because it was going around like rapid fire that this group chat existed. And so we decided.
Sorry about that. That was my fault.
So we decided, one, to put it on Twitter Spaces because that's when that first started. And, folks were able to come in and ask questions and we had it formatted. And then we got another ask of how can we listen to this in perpetuity? And so we expanded our skills to figure out a way to do Buzzsprout and put it on where podcasts are available, and which is really cool. And so now we have changed the format just a little bit to do a monthly podcast. But it is such a pleasure to be here with you, who not only came to Florida Black Girls Live in Tampa, but also had us for a special iteration at the state convening. And as always, my dog is going to be here. So sorry in advance for Gino.
Listen, it's fine. But yeah, no, but also shout out as far as the special episode that happened during Black Voters Matter statewide convening in 2022. That was a pleasure to have y'all down in Jacksonville doing all the great things. So yeah.
And shout out to you, Jamil, to always making sure we are in the room, making sure that when you bring us in the space, you're making sure we're being paid for the work that we do and the labor that we do, amplifying us on a national platform. Shout out to you for always tuning in and sharing. So we're super, super grateful for you. And then also for you being at Black Voters Matter, repping Florida the way that you do. So thank you so much.
On your back.
Literally.
I appreciate it. No, absolutely, absolutely. And just on another note with Florida Black Girls and Black Voters Matter, shout out to this whole civic and sexy collaboration that's about to go down. I think it's about to be really beautiful and great how this is going to transpire during this whole election season. And we'll probably get into a little bit more about that within this episode. But let us begin with the first segment of BLKFLA, affectionately known as What We Talking About. And it's spelled just like how it sounds, What We Talking About. So what we talking about today, let's dig into Project 2025. I'm just gonna rip the Band-Aid right off. Project 2025 is the conservative manifesto that is given to us by the Heritage Foundation. Yes, Jasmine's face literally says it all. The Heritage Foundation are a group of right-wing conservatives that decided to draw up this piece of policy that essentially will take out every single piece of service that this government offers to working class people within this country, and essentially wants to take out every single department that provides services that benefit is essentially taking out services that essentially benefit the people. And it is getting heavy traffic on mainstream media. It is getting heavy traffic all over social media. I have seen regular, everyday civilians, as we like to call them within the organizing world, who have shared their thoughts on social media around Project 2025. So now it's becoming serious, because it's no longer a conversation between us as organizers. It's now a conversation that's going out into the regular ethos. And so I feel like now that it's time for us to have this conversation on why Project 2025 is so dangerous to the very fabric of the Black community, especially here in the state of Florida, where, as we all know, this guy who currently just has been convicted with 34 felonies has a very strong base in this state, and that base is going to do everything in their power to ensure that if he wins no other state in this country, he's going to win the state of Florida when it comes to the presidency. Shout out once again to my good friend and a friend of both podcasts, Jasmine Burney Clark, who is doing her best as the state director of the Biden-Harris campaign to ensure that that doesn't happen. So I'm going to throw it to you all to get your thoughts around this Project 2020. Let's just say how it is. Get your thoughts around Project 2025 and what does this mean for the fabric of BLKFLA as a movement and just the Black community in Florida as we move into this election season.
Oof. Oof. I'm terrified. I'll be honest. It is a frightening notion, because if you ever listen to the Florida Black Girls and you listen to us rant about things, and we rant But in the middle of our rants, we are trying to explain how this is a state of emergency, right? Like we are in a state of emergency as Black people in this country, as Black people in this state, because there's just like all this talk and chatter around issues that folks think we're supposed to care about and just assume that we should. But there is no real education around those things. There's no real explanation around those things. So voters are like, that's just talk. Like, they're not really hearing it. They're not really processing it because y'all aren't really saying anything. So Republicans have now decided to capitalize on that and say, well, let's just go ahead and put our agenda forward. Y'all keep saying we don't have an agenda. Bet. We're going to make us one. Here it is. All 40 pages of it. And the agenda is to take it all away from you. If you don't have any appreciation for it, if you don't have any gratitude for it, if you just choose not to understand it, that means you don't really want it. So we're going to take it away. And it's not that people don't want it and they don't need it. On our end, we're not explaining it well.
Yeah.
So there is this concept of losing versus getting beat. And I know personally, I can always accept a loss. I can never accept getting beat. Like if I got beat, that means I just didn't even show up. I didn't try. And Democrats have to stop getting beat. We have to stop not trying. And Project 2025 is capitalizing on years of us not trying. And now we got to play catch up. So I'm terrified. That is my long-winded way of saying, if Republicans get what they want and that candidate is able to get back in the White House from whatever house arrest he is under, America, we got a problem. Like, where's Beyonce? Because Beyonce Giselle, honey, America has a problem.
A whole problem. And I think also it needs to really be pointed out. And I saw this early this morning on an IG page that was doing like a quick video around Project 2025 and the misinformation around Project 2025. And one of the pieces of misinformation was Project 2025 will happen even if a Democrat is in office. And so let's be very clear. The Heritage Foundation has made it perfectly clear in this 920-page manifesto that the only way that this works is if a staunch right-wing conservative is in the presidential seat. Like they have it in their sights that the only person that's going to allow this to really work is Donald Trump or whomever the presumptive Republican nominee is for the presidency. And so I feel like I really want for people to understand that there is no. Yes, we constantly have conversations all the time about how there is no real difference, if you will, between either candidate. But in this particular scenario, there is, because at the very least, and I use air quotes when I say this, we can push the other candidate towards not installing all of these things, but once Orange Man comes through the door, it's all guns ready to go. Let's push the button on all of this stuff that is in hand when it comes to Project 2025. And so I'll throw it to Jasmine to get thoughts around the things.
You must have felt my spirit being like, stop, wait a minute, just because there's a lot in that. I'd also like to notify you that this background is going to keep changing this whole show because we're getting serious here. So at first, I'd like to say and acknowledge that this is a masterfully done document, and anybody who does not agree with that is simply a hater and or they don't know strategy. Because number one, the Dems could never, but this is exactly what we need from the Dems. The fact that this has existed since 2024, 2023, whatever, that they've crafted this, and we are now in the defensive about how we're going to stop it. Baby, 2025 is in 2 minutes. Like, we are way behind the 8 ball on talking about a 2025. And it is, to Lindsay's point, it is very, very upsetting that Democrats refuse to be visionary on behalf of their voters, on behalf of Black people, on behalf of like what is possible. It feels almost offensive, and it makes you ask the question, are you just ignorant or dumb? Like, what is it? Why don't we have our own, justice 2025, equity 2025, like whatever the thing is that is a really deep and intentional and well thought out plan about how we take back the states, how we secure and support our school boards and our local governments, how we make sure that, we got a Supreme Court that's going to last generations and not roll back so many of the protections that we already have. Like, where is that vision? And why are we always on the defense of the Republicans' really good shit? So I know some people will say that's because Republicans have money and whatever. It's yes and, right? Like, yes, they have money. And also, there's incredible strategists that we know that have been trying to ring the alarm for a really long time about what is at stake and what is happening in these spaces up and down the ballot. And people have refused to listen, employ those people, or pay those people for their brilliance so that we are not in this condition that we are right now. The language on this, as someone that loves storytelling and loves words and language, building now for conservative victory through policy, personnel, and training. They have a playbook in here that you can download for free. They have trainings for people saying, if you want to be appointed to the cabinet, come watch this training so you know what to do on day one. I'm not sure if y'all know the power of manifestation or have read about it, but the Republicans are manifesting the government that they want. They are really in their spiritual bag around manifesting this government because they are talking as if they've already won. And we keep talking about Trump as a president from years ago and what has happened in the past, but cannot articulate a clear, succinct, and unified vision for what real justice, equity, progress, like all of that looks like. I also think that a part of that is to what you said, Jamil, around like the two candidates are different and what's at stake. I also feel like we keep kidding ourselves when we say like Trump is so exponentially bad. Yes, and, right? So many things are yes, right. And because if we always sit back and get comfortable around, well, you could have had Trump and Biden is just okay, then we never push him in the ways that we should have. We will never do that because Biden just told asylum seekers the other day, don't come. So like, depending on who you are and where you sit at the intersections of your identity, there's not a very clear difference between Trump and Biden. And we need to be real about that and stop playing in people's faces.
Yeah. And also, I feel like they really just went and got a bunch of us and just said, hey, y'all, give us some trainings around storytelling, the story itself, all of the things, so we can incorporate that into the hellhole, because that's what this is. This is the hellhole, and it works because it's like within the first couple of sentences of what Jasmine read, like I was intrigued. I was like, oh, wait a minute, like, well, maybe this might be a thing that I want to dig deeper into. Like they understand the playbook that we should be using, and it's like, let's incorporate this into what it is that we want to do so we can get more people on board. Because once again, we have this whole mythological, we have the whole mythological Black male voter that is inching over towards the conservative side deal that is happening in this country, despite so many polls that show otherwise. They still keep pushing the agenda of Black male voters want to be more conservative because of the whole economics thing. And the Dems aren't talking to Black male voters around economics. So let's talk to them now. And they're going to use this Project 2025 as a means to have that conversation. And so I think the question that I pose to you, Maya, is what is it that we do as organizers to go out into the communities and have this, as I like to call it, layman's terms conversation with people around Project 2025, the dangers of it, and how we can combat it past just go vote in August and November, because that's the only thing that we are hearing from. And since this is BLKFLA, we'll just focus on Florida. That's all we're hearing from the FDP right now. Go vote in August and November.
Yeah, and some billboards, right? Like we're seeing continuous use of that as a strategy to communicate, and neither here nor there. And we could take a look at what the expenditure reports say, if that's working. But to the question that you asked me about where do we go from here, I think the first thing that is interesting about this Project 2025 is that both parties are now using the word freedom, and they have two completely different meanings, right? Democrats have said so long, we need to reclaim the freedom narrative. And now all through this 920-page document, you see freedom, freedom, freedom. And the way I interpreted that to be was really kind of in the framework of white supremacy, right? Like in terms of this oneness, not necessarily freedom of everyone, but the freedom, individual freedom to be better than somebody else, right? Like I'm going to have the sustainability and the opportunity to shit on everybody else, right? Like I wish I had a non-curse word to say this, but as Democrats, because we're the big tent party, we're like, we want the freedom for everybody to come as they are, right? Like we have this continuous invitation to discipleship, and what are we giving folks in terms of this concept of freedom that the Republicans aren't, right? Like they are saying they have a clear playbook for each of us to interpret what freedom means to us based on this. That doesn't mean it's inclusive. And to the point that you made about Black men having space here, that doesn't mean that they are saying Black men come as you are. It is saying, however you interpret this document, if you agree with this ideologically, we're going to get it done, and hopefully you're in that number, right? Like, and hopefully that you're able to get in. But it is not speaking to or preaching to the choir in terms of a concept that we do of just like everybody come and we're gonna bring your poor, bring your old, right? Like you're young and all of that. And that is what I think is so interesting about this concept of freedom, that everybody's going to be saying this word over the next 6 months. And there's going to be two different interpretations of it. So much so that because we don't have message discipline, it's going to very easily tilt over this line that it could be almost subjectified to this concept that they have in Project 2025. We got big problems. We always have big problems. And for years in the organizing space, I know that I've been on calls and in meetings where folks are like, we need a Black agenda. We need this agenda and we need that. And it never comes into fruition, and voila. Right. And what is interesting is, yes, this is brilliant, but this is not the first time they've done strategy, right? This is the first time we've seen it probably in this lifetime in this way that it's accessible. But go back to the primary in terms of how Ron DeSantis became governor. There was a man named Adam Putnam who had a plan, who was recruited, who served faithfully in his 8 years as agriculture commissioner, who served in the House from Polk County. And there was a plan from Polk County all the way up to the governor's mansion. And this Trump wave certainly threw that off, but they have plans. They have already indicated who their speakers are going to be for the next 4 terms, right? Like, so this is not brand new. And I want folks to be very effing for real about that. This is something that we have seen time and time again. And Destiny's Children said it best. Can we keep up? I don't think so. I don't think so. I am not convinced about that. And I want us to become serious, as Jasmine's background says. But I feel like we are going to be playing checkers and they are playing chess, and they're playing Sudoku and we are playing Words with Friends, right? Like, it's just we're not even in the same, I'm in space. Like, that's how I feel most of the times dealing with this whole concept of politics, especially in Florida. And I feel like, I'm not saying that we should give up, but I feel like it is almost just a little too late in terms of what JoJo said. And we got billboards talking about freaking hurricane season and Miami's underwater. Like, what are we?
I mean, permission to hop in here, my Brown, because I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things that, like, people keep bringing up Project 2025, and it's like through the lens of decimating abortion and having a national ban, or the different social services that will get chopped. So you ask about, like, how do we just, like, go out there and talk to everybody? Jamal, excuse me. Like, how we talk to everybody. I have always stood on money is the great equalizer, right? Like, you have a lot of money, you have no money, you got a little bit of money, you care about your money, you want to keep your money. So it's like, we got to have economic conversations. And the thing with Project 2025 is there is a whole big old section about the environment and chopping the EPA, chopping NOAA. Now, I don't know about the rest of y'all Black folks in Florida. You can't take NOAA away from us. You can't take away the thing that tracks hurricanes, that tracks storms. Like, you can't do that. Tracks the ocean. Like, are y'all wild out here? You're just gonna leave. Florida Black Girls had a whole episode of our show 2 years ago after Hurricane Ian, talking about all the Black folks who got left behind, not only in the evacuation conversation, because they didn't have the resources to go, but then they were left with nothing. So you want to chop these programs, you want to chop these agencies while FEMA's running out of money? So it's like there's no hope on the back end, but then there's also no hope on the front end? Like, that's what we're doing? How many people know that?
Yeah.
Who's having that conversation with people? Because you're right, South Florida is currently underwater. Jasmine and I might float away in the middle of this recording at any moment. We just might. And I say it in jest, but I say it for real. We're going to talk about races that matter to us a little later in this program. Representative Marie Woodson tonight, at the time of this recording, had a fundraiser planned in her district that she's already had to cancel because her district is underwater. She's got to get, she can't raise the money to fend off her opponent tonight because she's got to care for the people in her district, but she also has to care for the people who aren't in her district, who are going to come to the district and support her. Don't come here. Don't let your car stall, because we got cars underwater right now in Hollywood. We got cars underwater in Hallandale right now, in West Park. Like, you can't even get to her right now to help her. So y'all go to mariewoodson.com and drop her some coin. I'm a shout out the homie, because she's doing the work while conservatives are literally working against her doing the work. And now there's a tsunami that got dumped on her head the night of her event. And so what does she do with it? She's the first Haitian American in the legislature from Broward County.
And
And we've had a whole conversation about those individuals. So we got to protect her. We got to help her.
And isn't that like the present trend of this year, as it was 4 years ago, of candidates can't raise money. Candidates can't raise money for their campaigns because they're having to deal with some form of natural disaster, if you will. 2020, the natural disaster was a whole panorama. And now 2024, it's natural disaster after natural disaster because nobody believes that climate change is a real thing. And the storms are going to get worse in this state as it gets hotter than normal in this state. But yet you want in Project 2025, you want to get rid of the EPA as well as NOAA. Other things that they want to get rid of, according to Project 2025, the Department of Education. Let's also get rid of contraceptives. So, let's also have this conversation around the fact that the Southern Baptist Convention had their convention this week, and everybody unanimously voted in favor of getting rid of IVFs. Intravertical fertilization. Like one of the many ways that people who initially can't really have kids but want kids utilize as a means to have children is now being considered an awful thing to use through scripture. As I throw the air quotes up again, because they're going to have some sort of scriptural backing as to why IVFs should not be a thing in this country. And so as a Christian, and shout out to Jasmine's IG handle, Church Girl in Therapy. I feel like I should be a church guy in therapy constantly and consistently every day. I have to keep having this conversation with people about how the things that white evangelicals consistently preach in their pulpits every Sunday, especially when we get to election season, has absolutely nothing to do with salvation and the real true purpose of the gospel, but has everything to do with maintaining the power that white supremacy and old white men in the U.S. government want to continuously keep well after this election is over with. And so I think it's important for us to know and understand, once again, that Project 2025 is the evils of the world. Oh, yeah, this was my favorite part of Project 2025. The Supreme Court and the Department of Justice will now be under full presidential control. So the president will be the one to fully control the Department of Justice and the United States Supreme Court, not just who we appoint. We don't have to go through any more Senate hearings of who we appoint. It's just, I'm going to appoint these people, and then we're going to have meetings around whatever decisions that you all make when these things come up the ladder from state courts all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. This is madness. And
I think my question to that is, what's our response? And not a response that's some canned statement or whatever, but what is our policy response? Mm-hmm. If these people say that they want to do this, how do we respond and say, actually, our government shouldn't function like that? This is a way that guarantees equity for everybody and actually a true freedom. What is our response to any of this, right? Because it doesn't make sense. Like you said, it's so antithetical to the freedom that they're claiming to preach about. It's just the opposite. But what's glaringly clear to me is, and I saw it on Twitter yesterday that said, America, the United States is the way that it is because they'd rather cut off their arm before they see Black and brown people have access to any of this stuff. That's why we don't have health care. That's why they're doing away with IVF, because that's also a means for LGBTQ people to be able to expand their families. So they're like, we don't care. Like, y'all can get it? No, we're cutting it out. And who talks about that in a storytelling way, in an anecdotal way, but then also in a policy way? And then to Lindsay's point, in an economic way. Like, who talks about the economics of not having healthcare for all in this country? Who talks about the economics of not being able to afford housing or the crumbling infrastructure that left Atlanta without water for 2 days, right? Like, who talks about the economic, the social, the mental health, the health, all of that? But we could start with the money first. Impact of being stingy, right? Of white people being stingy and saying, unless I can have it all to myself, you don't get none of it. And I think that unfortunately, but to me, it's also very clear, a linchpin in that conversation is white women. And white women need to do more. Like, white women need to do more. White women need to be doing revolutions in their homes, at the kitchen table, at Thanksgiving. Like, white women need to be going the fuck off on all of this and saying, I'm not down with this. Like, I'm not down with any of this. Because the only reason why abortion is not in this document and that section is so small is that they know that it will alienate their base of white women. White women need to get smart to the power that they have against all of this really terrible stuff and join together in the similar way that they are teaching people how to move policy and coalition, and in the same way that they banded together as 100 organizations. Like, let's have this conversation in a real way about what it means for all of us. Like, if we go have a big tent, let's have a big tent where everybody can be invited, everybody can be seen, everybody can be affirmed. And we can also have hard lines that say, we believe in this, we believe in this, we believe in this, and let people choose. And then that can be the Democratic chant. And then maybe from there, we'll get third and fourth parties. Who knows what's possible? But like, let's not play with people and say, yeah, we like this thing, but only if it looks like this. Yeah, we're going to support reproductive health care, but only if you're white. Like, yeah, we're going to do this, but only if you're straight. And we'll come back to the rest of you later. Because that, to me, is also not democracy. Absolutely. I think Maya was going to say something.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, it feels like it's giving very much survival of the fittest. Like, whoever makes it, like apocalypse, end of times, like, you know, so that is what this reminds me of. And Jasmine took the words out of my mouth, because I was certainly going to bring up the fact that this document misses and does not include the issues that they know that people care about and they know that they are going to lose on, but they certainly hide a bunch of stuff in there as well of things that people haven't contemplated yet. So yes, I agree that we should be forward thinking and provide folks with alternatives and ways that we're going to solve these problems. But I also think that we need to take a step back and also show the receipts of how this has been done before. So like, for instance, whatever happened to no taxation without representation, right? Like, and this concept that we literally left Great Britain and came over here because of the monarchy, this idea of totalitarianism, and literally it's right here in our faces that they are trying to fold all this into under one person, right? Like, again, these are things that we've seen time and time again. And yes, it's unfortunate. Our memories are short and we are taking away civics and American government and history. And obviously they're trying to get rid of the Department of Education. But these are the same, the lineage of the folks who are in power right now are the same folks who led revolutions, right? Like, and it's just like, this is wild conceptually to think about, that the stuff that white men in the 1700s fought for are the things that now Black people have been, and people of color and LGBTQ plus folks, right, are all fighting for, in this concept of just having spaces for ourselves, that now, again, they coveted these spaces and got that piece of revolution for themselves. And there's no other space for anyone else to be able to just be.
+1 to Maya, +1 to Jasmine. I do want to take a step back, though. We're talking about who needs to be like leading revolutions in their homes. I mean, maybe the reason they don't is because they're not as out of step as we assume. And we have to be, as Democrats, and I will speak for the Florida Black girls, I will not lump our C3 partner into this, but just like as us, we have to be honest about what it is that people actually genuinely care about before we start talking about who is voting against their own interest, who is not considering their own interest. Maybe they are. And maybe it is on us to be a little more selfish with the things that we care about. And I'm glad that you brought up faith, Jamal. I'm glad that you bring up the church, because we got to have hard conversations there too. We got to have and I am saying this as a Baptist who goes to church with our whole family. I don't make it every Sunday, but I make it most Sundays. My pastor will sit there and he will talk about how important voting is. He will make that plain. He will make that clear. He will let you know what's on the ballot. He won't tell you who to vote for. Can't do that with your C3, but you tell him, hey, like the education portion. And I keep waiting to hear a mention of Amendment 3. I keep waiting to hear that mention of Amendment 4, and it hasn't come yet. But I keep waiting. I keep listening for it, because it is on the ballot and you can't just ignore it and just pretend that it's not, especially when you got more Black women in your congregation than you do Black men. So we have this conversation, let's hold space for Black men in this conversation. Let's hold space. Let's make sure that they feel seen and heard. But Black women never get that. We never get that type of care.
I have so many pastors that are faith-based partners of ours at BVM who either tell me, so when we speak about Amendment 3 and 4, we're only going to speak about it from a C3 perspective. We're not going to speak about it from a C4 perspective, are we? Or it's, so do we even have to speak about Amendment 3?
You absolutely do. You absolutely do. And it's crazy that you just want to sweep that under the rug because you're like, oh, well, the Bible says. Well, like you said, does it? Because the Bible also says quite a few things about, I don't know, bottom feeders. And I'm pretty sure I be seeing fried shrimp on your plate at the fish fry. So if we're going to get into it, let's really get into it. Let's really talk about it. Let's really discuss this.
And I was going to say, I think it's interesting when we talk about, and especially the understanding the legality of it, and we don't want folks to go to jail because election jail is real jail.
Real jail.
And the cop-out we see a lot of times between the C3 and C4 space. If we had in our big tent ideas around or unification around values, we wouldn't have to talk about issues, right? It would be Amendment 3 is about, I won't say freedom because they hijacked it, is about choice and our free will, right? First book in the first chapter in the first book of the Bible, whole thing on free will, right? And our ability to choose. ABCs of salvation is about choosing and coming to salvation, right? And the same thing about Amendment 4. We love to talk about how the civil rights movement went through the Black church. How is Amendment 4 not a civil rights issue, right? Like in terms of, and also the concept, like Lindsay said, in terms of Black women's health, the maternal mortality rate that's disproportionately impacted Black women. This is not just about going and throwing your baby back to Jesus. That is not what this amendment is only about. This is about the entire concept of reproductive health care and making sure that folks can live full lives, period, nonstop.
I mean, I don't think you should stop. I should absolutely think you should keep going. And I think to this, now that we're on faith, and I'm gonna ordain all of y'all on the internet after this, but
let's go.
I think I just watched the Book of Clarence on Netflix. and every person of faith should watch it. There is a through line in that movie about weed that is fascinating. And it made me think of, I told my dad this joke once and asked him if the burning bush that Moses was talking to was weed. Because after he was talking to it, he started seeing signs and wonders. And I was like, And marijuana is not man-made, right? Which begs that it's been here. It's been here, right? Like since the beginning of time, it has been here. It was architected, made by God. It's been here. So like, how do we have that conversation that's like, it has been here? And when we look at the 7 sins that God hates, drugs is not one of them. Being gay is not one of them. Abortion's not one of them. But that gossiping y'all do in church is one, right? Like hating your brothers is one, right? Like causing mess is one of, is one of the sins that God hates. About to knock the mic over, Jesus. So I think like, how do we, and I think that that's up to some of us as people of faith, if that's our calling to take on that ministry. But to Maya's point, and I want to re-emphasize it, it is a flaw. It is a knock on us that we haven't done work to make sure that faith can be for all of us and that faith does not have to just rest with conservative Republicans. We have faith too. We believe in Jesus and Allah and all the people up there. We believe in all of them too. And that has defined a deeper love for humanity, a deeper love of planet, a deeper love of policy, a deeper love of our neighbors as we were called to have. Right. So it's like, how do we take that back and also align it with values and say it is absolutely a requirement that we are doing these things on behalf of people, that we're getting people out to vote, that we're talking about what's at stake up and down the ballot. People of faith should be a part of whatever the Democrats' Project 2025 is, right? The Republicans got it. Where are we in deep coalition with people of faith to create the world that we all deserve?
Because like,
oh wait, Jamal, Maya, go. Maya was on a roll.
and shout out to our friend of both podcasts again, who I had an episode with, Representative Michelle Rayner. Like this portion of this discussion halfway sounds like the What We Talking About segment that I had with her around the disconnect that the Black church has with organizing in this modern movement. And we spoke around Amendment 4 as well, and her stating that, Black women has always had this conversation around abortion, even when it wasn't a thing that you could legally, medically get. Black women have always had this conversation around what things you can eat to prevent having babies, what things you can do to prevent from having babies and things. And so this is going to still be a conversation whether or not Project 2025 eliminates some form of reproductive care in this country, because the thing that is within Project 2025 is eliminating the abortion pill, which then introduces the elimination of contraceptives altogether into the conversation within Project 2025 as well. So it's like, yes, we may not have an outright abortion ban within Project 2025, but they creeping on up on it. And I think also the reason why that there's not an outright abortion ban in Project 2025 is because the individual states are doing a hell of a job in making sure that that's the case in most of their states. Anyway, Mr. 6-week abortion ban in the state of Florida, Ronald DeSantis. But like, these are all the things. And I want to kind of continue this conversation, but we're just gonna shift out of what we talking about and still keep this conversation going after we do our customary question that we have to do with our guests on the show. So this particular portion of it, we are going to give you all a top 6. And when saying we're going to give you a top 6, that means Jasmine gets 2, Lindsay gets 2, Maya gets 2. It equals out a top 6 for the whole team. Top 6 favorite artists, and then top 6 influential Black figures that put you in the place of who you are as an organizer now. So we'll start with the artist first, and I'm going to start with Maya. Maya will give us her 2.
Okay, I'm going to try and do past and present. So my favorite artist present is Victoria Monet. She's the only student of Beyonce, Giselle Knowles-Carter, and Janet Jackson, and who could sing, dance, and perform at the same time. So that is present. Past favorite artist. I probably have to give it to Brandy for a lot of reasons. Brandy Norwood.
Yes.
Those are my 2.
Bible. The Bible, right?
The vocal Bible,
The vocal
correct.
Bible.
Yes.
Correct.
People better recognize this.
They better. Also can sing, dance, perform at the same time.
Lindsay.
Okay, so I did used to have a music blog. We talked about this on the last episode. So to limit me to 2 is rude. That's fine. I will take it. I will. I'll say like a contemporary pick. I am Rihanna Navy. She's never making music again. Now she's got a hair care line. Robin is never coming back. I'm making peace with it. It's fine. It's fine. But no, I love Rihanna. Well, one, she's a Pisces like me, and I am a Rihanna Pisces. But I just feel like her music just has spanned so many different emotions and feelings and tempos. And I just have such a deep appreciation for just like her evolution and just like the way she can just kind of like move in and out of those kinds of spaces. And my all-time favorite ever, Sade. Sade is a band. Sade is not just a singer, and I am a snob about it. I will tell everybody that is an entire band. Helen Falou Sade has kept her entire band intact. So she is the head of that organization, but she is just but a vessel. They are a whole unit. And I'm the masochist like pain, right? Like I'm a masochist in that way, is that I love artists who just refuse to give me new music. They're like, I'm never going back to the studio. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. So I think Rihanna and Sade would be my 2 picks.
I love that J School always takes it further than it needs to be, right? Like we were just supposed to name the artist, which is what I did. And she's like, here's my explanation as to why. But
well, again, like,
I'm gonna just move on.
there has to be. We're always talking about comprehension, Maya. I need the people to understand. So if we are going to say Democrats just can't say things and walk away, they have to explain it. I will explain it. I will talk you through it. I'm fine with that.
Talk you through it is insane.
Jazz.
It's very Lindsay though. We appreciate that about her. So this question is very hard for me because as a person with TikTok diagnosed at Hood, I listen to a lot of different type of music and a lot of it over and over again. And Maya will also tell you that I communicate in movie soundtracks and movies. So I know a lot of things. So I'm like, I can tell you a mood, I can tell you a soundtrack, an artist, that's harder. But what popped into my head was Kirk Franklin as a good church girl. Yes. Kirk Franklin, I will pull a Lindsay. Kirk Franklin was my first like step into secular music. And I remember like feeling really radical, like listening to the rap music, and my dad did not like it. And I was like, this is where the good music is. And I think
wanted a revolution.
Exactly. Whoop, whoop. Like, exactly.
That one.
To Lindsay's point about spanning generations, like to see his evolution from the family to One Nation Crew, like all of that is, I know all the words, and today's a new day. If there is no sunshine, I love it. And then for the other artist, I'm sad at the first two that popped into my head are men, but it's also T-Pain. I am a T-Pain girly, Tallahassee hero, and he is on a run right now of getting his flowers, and I love that for him. I remember seeing him in the Moon that could hold 50 people and being like, who is this man? And then hearing the music on the radio. So I love T-Pain, and I would like to go to Wisconsin and his tour. So
we
Oh
will
my
stay,
God.
we will stay on you, and for you to start off the top 6 Black influential figures with your 2.
Okay. Number 1, Shirley Chisholm, all day. Caribbean American, incredible, unbought and unbossed, all the way through. The namesake to my consulting firm. First Black woman, major candidate for presidency. They was trying to carry this country on her shoulders, even though this country didn't care about her. And it feels so much of like what we do in Florida. That's like, I want to love you so hard. I want to do right by you. Just love me back. And in spite of, she did so much. I also really love that she did it like in her own name. It wasn't attached to a man or a partner or kids or whatever. Like, we don't know who Shirley Chisholm was with. Like, it was Shirley Chisholm. And I really, really love that. So Shirley Chisholm. Another person that is influential to me, and where I'm at right now, I'm trying to think of someone who I may quote all the time. The person that pops into my head, interestingly enough, is Chelsea Handler. Who is, I've met her many times. I've gone to see her comedy show, and she is a reminder to me that people can evolve. So to see how she has evolved as this like famous person, this rich person, and the ways that she tries to put her privilege on the line, I'll never forget that there were times that she was like, I am rich, and where I can give away my money, I will. Like, rich people who don't do that, I don't understand you. What is your point here on this planet? I'm not splitting a bill at dinner, because if I'm the richest person there, like, I'm covering everybody. I'm paying for my friend. And I thought that was the first time I had heard someone talk in that type of way. And I love that, like, she's talking about policy and abortion access in a language that people can understand and with an outrage people can identify with. And I think that we need to be in coalition, in relationship, in friendship with more of these folks to say, like, let's talk about this together. Like, let's learn and grow on this together. So interestingly enough, it'd be Chelsea Handler.
Lindsay.
Again, to satisfy Maya, I'm going to start with an honorable mention just to upset her. So Plies. I love me a Florida man is Florida Manning right now. And he is talking about real civic issues and real civic hangups in ways real people will understand. So shout out to Plies for doing God's work, because we are tired out here. The first person for me is Kamala Harris. I love her. I love me some Veep. And I just appreciate that she has really embraced both sides of her heritage while never letting you forget, I am a Black woman in this space, right? Like, she can celebrate Diwali, she can do all those things that honors her Indian culture while being a Black girl from Oakland, while being a Black girl who went to Howard, while being a Black girl who goes to a Baptist church, while being a Black girl who pledged a Black sorority. Like, she is in it. And I just have such a deep appreciation for that and the way that she shows up. And then the second person, shout out to Gwen Cherry all day. First Black woman in the Florida legislature. I'm always going to give you a rattler because I will carry FAMU on my back. So shout out to Gwen Cherry and the legacy that you have left Florida Black girls. So those are my picks.
Thank you, Maya.
Yeah, Gwen Cherry is the original Florida Black girl. And so certainly love everything about that. And because they did not follow the rules, I'm going to do 4. So therefore, one is because I'm just like, this is wild. Look, I am an eldest daughter and a rule follower, and I'm just looking at them do everything you told them not to do. So therefore, I'm reclaiming my time that they took from me.
That's real Leo behavior. I love it.
Also, I'm a middle child. I will never apologize for taking up space because I never get to. Thank you.
That's fair. But now I'm gonna do my 4. Okay, great. So 1 is Huey P. Newton. I would have probably been in his harem if I was alive during that time. He is such a inspiration to me in terms of what it means to be an organizer, what it means to actually bring young folks into movement, to have strategy, right, that is intersectional to both community outreach and organizing and policy, and also was just a very good looking man too. That also doesn't hurt, but very, very also, and shout out to your hat that talks about the Black Panthers.
Yes.
So I spent a lot of time reading his short stories and essays, and a huge Huey P. Newton fan, and he certainly informs a lot of my perspective. 2, Angela Davis, for a couple reasons. 1, she's an academic and an educator, which certainly is important to me. I am also both of those things. I love to read. I love to teach. I also teach on the collegiate level now. And another thing about Angela Davis that is interesting to me is I believe I can do anything, including represent myself in court. And that's why I think also Angela Davis is a badass, because she represented herself in court. And I feel like I could do that and be like, they lying, Your Honor. Like, this is cap. Like, I feel like I would do that in my legal case and win. And so Angela Davis, for a lot of reasons, that intersection between her bravery, her courage, her academic prowess, and then and is now still a force to be reckoned with now as just chef's kiss to me. 2 more. Barack Obama. Also a good organizing, and not necessarily for his policies, no, but OFA, I think, is something that is really, really interesting in terms of how we were able to move through the turn of the century and be able to, his campaign was able to adapt to now being online and having computers and all of that. That is very interesting, I think, to me, and is certainly something that informs, especially as we talked about with natural disasters that are happening and folks not having access to internet. What does that look like? And I think that certainly OFA is the blueprint for now how Democratic campaigns are run in this country. Last but not least, Simone Sanders. A lot of people talk, and these 2 ladies gave elected officials. I gave 1. I think Simone Sanders is someone who looks like me, someone who is my homegirl that I probably went to high school with, went to college with, and is an operative. A lot of times when people think about politics, we think of elected officials, and we have never really seen until now folks who have been operatives on Front Street. And I think that she is such a good example of what it looks like to be behind the scenes of, I'm like, yeah, this is exactly, what I do. I'm able to point to that when I give examples of the work that I do every day. And it's also able to pinpoint the message, right? And really drive it home in a way that makes sense. And who is unafraid to say BFFR on her show, right? Or say that something is so unserious in a way that we are talking to each other. So I reclaimed my time, and those would be the 4 in terms of my Black folks.
Listen, this is why I love y'all for real. Because it's just gonna always be this. It's gonna always be this. So so this is okay. So this is how we're gonna do this. Because I want to give reason as to why you all were chosen as the last episode of the first half of the season, but also as one of the Elite Eight, if you will. Because that's what the first half of the season was. Elite Eight, the 8 guests that essentially influenced BLKFLA as a movement, the podcast, or people that needs to be known when it comes to Black political organizing within the state of Florida. And honestly, y'all fit in all three of those categories. I've always told this story of how Jasmine is essentially one of the heroes in my head. Seeing the work that Jasmine did, either with Broward BLM Alliance, Dee, or in 2020, the incredible campaign that Jasmine had in State House that she should have won, but I mean, we'll just leave that be. Because she had a phenomenal team that had like half of my friends on the actual campaign team. I was like, oh, she got all the homies. Like, okay, that's fine. And then of course, Florida Black Girls, not just as a Twitter space, but as a movement, is essentially the main inspiration behind wanting to make BLKFLA a movement, because it was just all these, not just the three of you all, but just all these phenomenal Black women that was doing all this dope stuff in the state. Whether on the policy legislative side or the political operative side, or just even in just flat out organizing spaces. And so that's the reason why you all as a unit have to be essentially a part of this Elite Eight, and just more so just like the last guest within the Elite Eight. Because it's just better it's better to save the best for last. So there's that. So this is the last episode of the first half of the season. Then what we should do is we should conclude our conversation in the first episode of the second half of the season. Bring you all back for the first episode of the second half, because the first episode of the second half is going to be more issue driven. And we can jump right back into why statewide races essentially matter. But before we leave, we're going to definitely get you all to answer our final question that we ask everyone on this show. And the final question is a great one. It's a great one. What is your vision of a Florida where Black people live in freedom, equity, and authenticity? And we will start with Maya.
I was going to say, can we put some rules? Because we need to, is this one word? Is it a phrase? Because again, Lindsay's going to preach her trial sermon, and probably Jasmine too. So I just want to make sure we have some boundaries around this answer.
We'll do 2 minutes.
Okay. We're going to do 2-minute reflections. I can do that. Okay. So I think for me, as a Florida-born, Floridian native, in rural Florida, in an area where the high school I went to was the only one in the town. It's only 2 middle schools, right? Like that, I believe that vision of Florida is one that amplifies and provides space for that diversity that is both rural and urban, that is both that is not run by corporations and corporate greed, one that allows people to be able to pay their rent, one that allows people to not just pay their rent, but be able to go and frolic, to go and have days that they can spend on our beautiful beaches. My vision for Florida is one where Florida actually exists and isn't underwater. My vision for Florida is one where it is not succeeded from the United States, right? Like, especially in Project 2025, which is a possibility. There were billboards in Tallahassee for years talking about a succession from the Union. In the year of our Lord 2015, I believe it was even up there at its latest point. My vision for Florida is one where literally everybody thrives, and it's not just based on survival, where folks can ideate and dream, and those things are able to come to pass. One where our legislature hasn't been hijacked by folks who have hijacked Jesus, that folks who want to believe in whatever faith that they choose, that they can do that freely, that is not in opposition to or not in persecution of somebody else. Like, go and do your own thing and let that be that. That is my vision for Florida in 2 minutes.
15 seconds to spare. That was awesome. Jasmine.
That's great. I think that adding on to all of what Maya said, I would also add my vision for Florida is one where it doesn't feel like hell in temperature and in policy. It's one where we actually get to maximize the resources that we have without being exploitative. So as the Sunshine State, how are we doing solar? How are we doing, water energy, but also preserving our coral reef? How do we not have boiling oceans all the way around us? And how are we also welcoming to Cuba that is 90 miles away from us, where a Russian ship is parked right now? How do we just, like, as a country, like, how do we capitalize on what God has given us and what Indigenous folks have tended to for so long that we're just ruining right now? I think a lot about children. My vision for Florida is one where Black children can grow up and feel safe, or not even grow up, right now, feel safe in their young age, and they feel opportunity is here. And I think I'll end it by saying my vision for Florida is one that we don't have to run from, that we know that we could be here and be home for forever.
Dope sauce. I appreciate that. And Lindsay.
Our spoken and unspoken rule is, if a Black woman said it, you don't repeat it. So everything Maya said, everything Jasmine said. The only other thing I would add is how Black folks in Florida all make space for one another. How Black American people in Florida make space for Caribbean people, make space for African people, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
How our aunties and our elders and our aunties and our elders make space for millennials and Gen Zers, and vice versa. How the faith community in Black Florida makes space for folks who might question faith, and vice versa. Like, at the end of it, we are all Black people trying to exist in this state, and we all got to get on one accord there, because everyone else just sees us as Black people. And we are the monolith to them, even though we aren't the monolith with one another. So I would like us to first find harmony, not change one another, not trying to, get people on one accord per se, but just how we find ways to exist harmoniously, because we aren't one another's enemy. And I think we have to figure out what that looks like so we don't present as one another's enemy.
Right at 2 minutes. That was awesome. Listen, y'all, I appreciate y'all coming through. I look forward to July when we all convene with each other in person in Tampa during the Civic and Sexy Brunch extravaganza, brought to you all by Florida Black Girls and Black Voters Matter and all of the other wonderful, awesome partners that we have along the way. And I look forward to having you all back in August when we come back for the second half of the season and the second half of the year, as I like to call it, chaos time. Chaos time.
I mean, please, can we have Jasmine just say one time, "This is fine" with that background she's got? Speaking of chaos.
This is fine. This is fine. Everything is fine. It's all fine.
This is all fine.
Oh, it's fine.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jamal Still showing y'all love and appreciation for joining us on this BLKFLA experience. Stay free, stay blessed, and continue as always to get acquainted with greatness. We are out.
If Revolution was a movie, I'd be theme music. Time to ignite what I spit is lighter fluid. Stepping into a fixed race, such a glorious design. Marching into the biggest fight of our lives. Time to spoil the revolution.